I was trying to think of how, without this thing, was life simpler back then? So I began searching through the scripture, and I found Mark 6, which is a couple of days in Jesus' life, early in his ministry, that I thought maybe we briefly look at how Jesus approached the situation. And then I want to get into the real sermon. First, I want to look at Mark chapter 6, and then I want to get into the real sermon after that in Hebrews chapter 4. Mark chapter 6, we're going to go through this passage, and we're going to kind of look at a day in the life of Jesus, a couple days in the life of Jesus, early in his ministry, so he's pretty busy. And we pick it up in verse 30, so I'm going to read through that, a couple of verses. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught, and he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And then it says in verses 45, it says, He made his disciples get in the boat and go before him to the other side of Bethsaida, and he dismisses the crowd. But what I want to look at briefly is I want to figure out how Jesus managed that. Because he was a man, right? He had to eat, he had to sleep, he had to rest. And yet he was able to manage, that the fact that he was continually being inundated by the crowds coming their way. And that is Kppa. And I made it hard to remember on purpose. Kppa. So it's Q, come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while. That's in verse 31. He had a need for a quiet place. And then Jesus made the disciples get on board and go ahead of him, so he protected them from what was about to come. And then he went up on the mountain to pray, presumably to process all that was going on there. And then pray is the third one. And then he was alone on the land, alone. So Kppa, quiet, protection, prayer, and alone. And that might be a prescription for how to manage the kind of on-demand life. We need a protection that protects us from things rolling over us all day long. And we need to figure out a way to do that. But the amazing thing is, in Hebrews chapter 4, they call it the Sabbath. Now, the Sabbath isn't a prescriptive thing. It's a heart thing. And it's not as simple as to stop working. In chapter 4, in verses 9 through 11, I want to read that, because that, I think, is the hard part, the heart part of the Sabbath. In chapter 4, verse 9, it says, "So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience." So what the Hebrews writer is doing is warning the Hebrew people that he's writing to that the Sabbath is designed to make you stop from rest. And the interesting thing is the action words in this passage, because he's talking about making every effort and let us strive. So those are not easy words to do because it's hard. It's hard to stop working. It's hard to do, and requires practice to do the Sabbath, and requires a social sanction. You have to be in a group that gives you permission to stop. And so Jesus took the disciples to another place because he was trying to give them a Sabbath, and he spent the night on the mountain because he needed a Sabbath to get away from the pressures of what was going on. Because it requires effort, because it's difficult to remember that it's not on our shoulders to remember who we are and whose we are, that this crazy mixed up person with all my flaws that I have, I'm not very good at this. God says, I know, but you're still making a difference in the kingdom because I'm working through you.